Hey everybody. In this video, I want to do a little bit of a preview and introduction to the Atlantis zine that I recently put out. It is completely based around the teachings of esoteric philosopher Manly Hall. So I've aggregated information from across his lectures and books and articles and pamphlets and sort of synthesized them and put them together in this package. There's a lot of my own interpretations in here. So this is now available in digital or print version. And I am very proud of it. I think it's the best single source of information that you'll find on not only the idea of Atlantis, but concerning the larger themes of human history and how human life fits into and the story of the trajectory of human life fits into a story of the fact that we live in a spiritual universe, and it discusses the relationship between humankind and God and attempts to understand human history and human evolution from this spiritual understanding rather than a materialist-based understanding, which is sort of the orthodox view that we have today. So that's what the theme of this is about. It's about more than just Atlantis. So I want to just go into a couple of the main themes and ideas that you can find here. And I want to note that if you do purchase this, on the back cover, there's a password. And either this week or next week, I'm going to record a full video walkthrough of it. So that'll be available to anybody who purchases this. You can watch that, and I'll go over all the material. So the basic premise of this worldview that I'm putting out in this study guide, which is a worldview that I've learned not only from studying Manly Hall, but also theosophy, and then before that, really studying system science, because there's similar principles emphasized in system science that you find in the esoteric field. And actually, that's how I got into studying esoteric philosophy, was after studying system science and attempting to kind of put together an understanding of how the human system works on a psychological and a sociological level. And there were certain things I couldn't put together until I got into the sort of esoteric tradition. So that's a little bit of the background. The premise here is that, like I said before, that the whole universe is God. There is only God, meaning there is only a unity, and all diversity takes place within unity. So that is the premise upon which the entire Atlantis hypothesis is built, because when we're talking about Atlantis, or in earlier stages of human history, or when we're trying to make sense of our current stage, we're understanding that this is taking place as a cycle of existence that is happening within God, by God, and for God's benefit. So again, the unity contains the diversity. So in the early pages, I would say the first quarter of this is not even about the sort of history of humanity. It's more about just laying this foundation of how to approach these topics and understand human life in this concept of we live in a spiritual reality. Fundamentally, it's a spiritual reality, not a material reality. And the whole concept of a spiritual reality is that everything is proceeding according to a certain type of law. And there, by implication, is a plan and a purpose for everything that happens. Now, that is very different than the materialistic view, which is of the mind that everything is chance, everything is just circumstances, and we're just sort of like accidentally here, and we're more or less helpless. So again, a very different worldview is taught by Manly Hall, and this is the sort of worldview that I'm trying to emphasize and teach on my channel and in my various videos and in these publications. So let's go and investigate a little bit into that reality concept of the basis of creation being by God, within God. So the basic relationship that we're going to be looking at is how the oneness becomes a trinity but the oneness is not violated when the Trinity happens. It's sort of a, a sequence of partitions that take place within the oneness. But the three are still one. It's the three as one. So there's still that unity concept involved. So this is what I write here, and this is in this section. This is on page 6. So my sort of overview of this worldview is that God is always and ever one, a unity. This unity has two states of being, passive and active, or yin and yang. The passive or yin state of God remains always in unity. So it doesn't act, it doesn't move, it just remains forever itself, which is this sort of undifferentiated, unconditioned aspect of the divine. That never is violated. That is an eternal state. So that's the yin state. The yang state is the active state. And this is where existence as a cycle comes in. So when God moves into an active state, then we have a creation happen, a cycle of creation. And this cycle of creation happens as one great cycle comprised of several subsidiary cycles. And the old teaching is that it's, and this is something we'll look at in a minute, it's 7, the 1 becomes 3, and then the 3 becomes 7. So the 3 is the sort of number of that master cycle, but the 7 is going to be 7 subcycles within that one master cycle. So God remains forever in unity. And when God moves into the active state, God periodically moves into a state where it adopts the appearance of diversity. And this diversity is first expressed in the form of a trinity. So spirit, soul, body is the basic trinity. Or spirit, matter, and then the soul. So in the Vedas, the ancient scriptures of India, the relationship between Unity and Trinity is described around the Trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, which again loosely corresponds to the spirit, soul, body concept. And then you have the 3, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and then you have them standing or existing in relation to the 1, which is the sort of yin state I'm talking about, the undifferentiated, unconditioned state of God, and that's Brahman. So you have Brahma as the yang, and then Brahman as the yin. So this is the foundation of reality. This is the foundation of truth. So anytime you're going to be looking at any component of reality or component of creation, that framework that you're building of whatever you're studying must exist upon this foundation of unity moving into Trinity. So I quote Manly Hall here. He says that the root of things is unity, the one and the all, the beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega. Within the nature of this nameless eternal one is set up the framework of creation. And then he says, so what does this framework look like? He says, the universe consists of 3 parts. These parts are called the divine spirit, the divine mind, and the divine form. These 3 are the first gods out of the one God, the 3 witnesses, the Trinity. So from the Trinity, you then have the septenary. So again, this is important because when I say that there's 7 ages, or when the ancient teachings say that there's 7 ages of man, and we're in one of those 7 stages, and Atlantis was a previous stage, we're explaining why 7 ages. Where does this idea of 7 come from? Well, this is where it comes from. It comes from this, it's sort of like the basis of sacred geometry, the fundamental principles of Pythagorean mathematics, is this idea of understanding the divine law in terms of the essential principles of number. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. How it's portrayed here, is that before we ever get to the human history part, we're talking about the archetypes, the archetype of 3, the archetype of 7. So listen to this. It is said that the Logos, now we're talking about God and the creative aspect, when the time comes to create the material universe, entered into a state of deep meditation. So God creates as a meditative act of itself within itself. So, as this act of deep meditation, God centralizes his thought power upon the 7 flower like centers of the 7 worlds. And I have a picture here of the chakras, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about entering the deep meditation and gradually moving down its thought or conscious energy until it hits the root chakra. And what we consider material creation is this root chakra. So he says, gradually his life force descended from the brain, which was the great superior world, or the heaven worlds, which is the one that's on the cusp of this yin state of God that remains in unity. Okay, so his life force descends from the brain, and striking these flowers one after the other gives birth to the lower worlds. When at last his spirit fire struck the lowest center, the physical world was created, and his flame was at the base of the world's spine. When the world returns to him again, and he once more becomes supreme in consciousness, it will be because he withdraws the life from these 7 centers, beginning with the lowest, and returns it again to the brain. So this is the cycle. The cycle is the downward motion of the conscious energy among these 7 centers. And then the end of the cycle is when that energy is raised back up. So when that happens, that down and then up, that's a cycle. That's the master cycle. And so within that cycle, each of those 7 flower-like centers is going to be emphasized. So that's the cycle, down and up, in this divine sort of context. And remember, the chakra concepts, we're talking about metaphysics. So we're talking about dimensions in space that are non-physical, but that underlie physical existence or physical reality. So I have more about that, about the septenary in here. But it's only after establishing this septenary concept do I then move in to discuss the 7 ages of man. And I have a little diagram here. So here's what Manly Hall says about that. He says, just to again to recap what I was saying before, the human race is one great spiritual being, meaning that the human race is not just a species, it's a kingdom in nature. So it means that this kingdom is, so there's the mineral kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom, and then there's these higher kingdoms that are in the metaphysical world. And each kingdom corresponds to one of these flower-like centers, and it also corresponds to a certain type of energy, specialized energy that's emitted within this divine creation, this divine consciousness. And so we're understanding humanity to be a special thing within nature that has attributes that no other kingdom has. And mankind plays a certain role in nature. And furthermore, mankind, being this sort of kingdom, is a whole comprised of parts. It's not just individuals that we just say, yeah, I guess you can sum them up and we'll call them mankind if you just add them all together. But actually there's a consciousness of the whole. And this is really the same principle that underlies Carl Jung's philosophy of the collective unconscious and the archetypes, because that whole thing exists because of this part-whole relationship that humanity has with itself, which each individual human is linked in consciousness with the whole. And sort of the foundation of mysticism is that it's possible to have an experience of the whole, or to have these different types of experiences that are archetypal, that are pertaining to the consciousness of the whole. So that's why we can have these experiences, because of this part-whole relationship. So this concept of the 7 ages of man is intimately related to the idea of the 7 races. Now, race in philosophy is not about skin color. It's about a psychological and physical design of a human being. So the idea is that this cycle of 7 that takes place within this master cycle, each of those cycles is characterized by a certain design of the Earth system. The continental, climate, the way the elements are constituted. And so each of those ages has a unique design for the human kingdom. The human kingdom is archetypal, just like the vegetable kingdom is archetypal or the animal kingdom is archetypal. There is a place in nature for each of these as part of the meditation of God. There's a plan and a purpose for everything to exist in the way that it exists. There's a certain experience associated with each form in nature. And the aggregator and the actual experiencer of all these different forms is that divine consciousness. So that's the connection. And the reason that there is a meaning and purpose behind things is this idea that things are caused by the intentionality of a divine being. So just to give a quick quote, just to pull something off of this page, because I'm not going to read all of it. It says, Manly Hall's teachings on the spiritual foundations of man. The human creature is one being. This is a quote. The human creature is one being. Humanity is an entity, an entirety. It is a unity, a one creature existence. We do not have spiritual beings, plural, divided into racial groups, but one humanity ascending step by step. The races only seem to be different, but in reality, one life is emerging from one race to another. The human being has created this ascending ladder of races, and up it he climbs, race after race, painfully through the ages, moving on from race, the condition of race, the segregation or differentiation of humanity, into an inevitable state of racelessness, which lies at the end of the pattern. We were one in the beginning, and in the end we will be one again. It is in our middle distance that we are hypnotized by the illusion of diversity, by which we seem to be many. Actually, we are still one life and one creation. So only after do I set that foundation are we going to begin to look at different cycles, the different races, and the history of how we evolved from the earlier cycles into the current cycle and what the meaning is. But the basic idea is that all souls that exist today were once Atlantean, and all souls that were at once Atlanteans were before then Lemurians. So it's like a school system that the soul, the divine sort of soul, the world soul, which has partitioned itself into its own consciousness into these individual experiences of individual personalities or individual life units. The idea is that we're talking about a reincarnation concept. The idea is that the soul goes through levels just like we go through levels of school. So the soul required, in its earlier stages, required the experience of being a Lemurian human. And what did it mean to experience life as a Lemurian? That was an experience, according to the esoteric teachings, that we all went through. Again, Atlantis was the next step, the next stage for the world, not just for the human experience, but for the whole world, because there was a different model of the Earth system at those different cycle points. So again, we were all once Atlanteans. We all experienced the sort of highs and lows of Atlantis, and then we move on in time to now being in our current cycle, which is called the Aria. So the Atlantis is the fourth cycle, Lemuria was the third, and then now we're in the fifth. So one of the main concepts in reincarnation is that there is there's karma that's blocked to us because we do not have our spiritual perceptions awakened to be able to understand and be in tune with our past life experiences. But there is a karma that we have brought forth from the past. And now we're getting to the point of why is this relevant today? Because Atlantis is associated with the idea of a fall, that there was a high culture that fell into corruption, and at that point what was called black magic, which is a misuse of knowledge of the sort of laws of causation that underlie physical reality, the metaphysical world. So there was knowledge of that was misused And I guess you could say the theme of the misuse is that instead of using it to fulfill the divine plan, it was used or misused by certain classes or certain castes or certain priesthoods to fulfill their own personal ambitions that had become separate from, in their mind, separate from the sort of larger law and plan of creation. And so that mismatch between the inevitability of the law of creation and the way that that knowledge had been used in the sort of dark times of the Atlantean age sets up a karmic pattern that resulted not only in the destruction of Atlantis, but also set up a karma pattern in all the souls of the Atlanteans who lived and experienced life during those times. And that karma has to be played out and overcome in future lifetimes. So now that we're in the fifth age, humans today, we all have inherited karma, meaning we're all born sinners, quote unquote, in the sense that we carry forth sort of baggage from these past lives. And that, I think, explains why throughout history or sort of modern recorded history, let's say from the past like 12,000 years, but really going up to, we really don't have much that's solid in terms of history in writings before like 500 BC. But even just during the period of time that we know about, we continually see all over the world in different cultures this archetype still playing itself out in our age, which is like the fall of Rome essentially is like a sort of microcosm of this Atlantean saga, where you have a high culture develop, but then through the sort of misuse of knowledge and the fall of culture and values, and the sort of losing sight of the divine relationship the relationship we all have with the divine, there's a gradual decay that takes place, a sort of rot that takes place, and that inevitably leads to the collapse of that civilization. But there's always a death rebirth thing taking place. That's part of the key qualities of evolution, is that an old form must die for a new form to grow, to emerge. And so these are experiences that are important for the souls. Even something like the fall or a collapse of a civilization is an important and necessary stage or life experience for the souls who are participating in that. So to be someone who had fallen into corruption and then to experience the fall of that is an important experience, because it emphasizes on a deep soul level the inevitability of the law. And the idea, this is really, I think, the issue with climate change and sustainability is very much premised on the same set of principles, which is the fact that if we ignore the law of nature and we try to impose our will, then we lead to environmental destruction and collapse. And that's happening all over the world. And so it's this theme of getting away from the law, getting away from the plan, and losing connection with the divine that sets the stage for this type of collapse. So that's what we have happening right now in the world today. And this is why it's really relevant, is that these themes that took place in Atlantis are not something that happened to other people long ago. We all experienced that, even though those memories and that knowledge is at the moment blocked to us. And it's part of our karma, I think, from having experienced what we experienced in those earlier cycles of existence. So we're here now to learn a lesson and to play out a certain stage of human life experience as part of these 7 cycles. So we're in the 5th cycle. There's a certain themes and certain growth tendencies that need to be expressed. And so this Atlantis thing is so relevant in a way that most people won't initially understand, but I hope just listening to me talk about it, you'll get a sense of why it's important to understand. So I'm going to just flip to the back page and read just my parting thoughts. This is a quote from Manly Hall, and it kind of solidifies what I'm saying here. Our world stands as Atlantis stood. Our buildings rise upward. There are many towers pointing to the skies. Our libraries are filled with ancient wisdom. Our scientists and philosophers are exploring the mysteries of nature. Again, we fly through the air and under the sea. Again, we walk the path that Atlantis walked. but we must go on. We must strive to attain the glory of a greater work. For a day we have forgotten the things we were. A veil conceals the past, that we may learn our lessons in a different way. Listen to that. For a day we have forgotten the things we were. A veil conceals the past, that we may learn lessons in a different way. We are unfolding new powers, building new faculties, mastering new arts, and creating new ideals. It is our duty to take the best that Atlantis had to give and to learn the mysteries that Lemuria, now lost beneath the waters of Australasia, gave us in times even more ancient than Atlantis. And we must use this knowledge as steps to build upon, to build a new temple, one based on the foundations of the old. So these are important and I think vital ideas to understand, particularly if you're somebody who is trying to understand your place within a larger existence, and how the sort of atrocities of the current age fit into a kind of meaningful pattern. Because it's easy for people, I think, to sink into a type of like existential despair when you're looking at, just look at the state of the environmental collapse and look at the state of the social crises taking place all over the world, and the inequality, and the fact that we all know that we are capable of doing so much better than what we are. Like, how do we make sense of this suffering that we're going through? And for me, Manly Hall is like the great guiding light to understand the larger meaning and purpose behind these type of things. So please pick up a copy of the zine. I think you'll really enjoy it. You'll definitely get something out of it. And this is the first in the series, so I'm going to be building off of this foundation and gradually taking things up to modern day. And when I get to the some of the later ones, which are very relevant to today, particularly to the idea of the sort of UFO phenomena and the idea of what some people call breakthrough energy. I think it's just etheric energy, which is alchemy, and the reality of that science. People are going to be really blown away. So please support my channel if you can. And thanks for tuning in. And I'm going to do, hopefully maybe later today or tomorrow, do another of the lecture analysis series. I haven't done those in a while. So anyway, take care.